Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Tom Zuck's U.S. Civil War Diary, 1863, Part 3. Now, this was today's diary segment was originally published as a Zuck Family Memories Collection, number 9, or ZFMC number 9, published May 28, 1988. January 9, 1863. At about 11 o'clock, we left our moorings and put up White River to some unknown region. What the upshot of this new move is to be, I cannot form any reasonable conjecture, but would not be surprised if the Vicksburg farce were about to be played over again. Yet I hope to God it may not prove so. I feel a great deal better this morning, but am excessively weak as yet. If we could only get something that we could relish in the way of eatables, I believe we would all be well or better in a week. But these detestable hard crackers and fat meat are enough to starve the whole regiment. Someone has just suggested that the doctors call up the companies and feel the pulse of the captain or orderly and prescribe accordingly, for it appears that they are nearly all reporting on the sick list anyhow. Some companies have about 30 on the list this morning. 6 o'clock p.m. We are still slowly moving up the White River, but it is the most dreary and forbidding-looking region that I ever dreamed of. One can scarcely see a human habitation for miles. What our government wants of such a country, that they send such large expeditions to reclaim it, is more than I can conceive of. We put up some of our tents on the hurricane deck this evening, so as to be sheltered from the inclemency of the weather, and it begins to look quite homelike. The old tents are the best things after all, if they are only thin canvas. January 10, 1863. Last night there was another man died in the cabin of this boat. He was a member of Company G. This makes the fourth man that company has lost since we left Memphis. We have pulled up alongside the bank again to take on wood. Some say that we are now on the Arkansas River, and that we are to make a dash on Little Rock, where there is in process of construction some rebel gunboats and some fortification. Our lieutenant has just been on deck to ascertain how many there was in the company who were able to stand a 25-mile march. This begins to look as if something was to be done. About 1:30 o'clock this p.m., our regiment got underway and went about a mile up the river toward the rebel works, and there lay down in a large meadow where we remained till about 5 o'clock in the evening, when we were quickly formed again and moved off up the river in company with the gunboats, who went up the river just as we moved. When we came within 2 miles of the fort, the gunboats opened a terrific cannonade on the rebel works, under which we approached within about 3/4 of a mile of the fort. I thought I could form a pretty correct conception of what a cannonade would be without hearing one, but this night's work convinced me that I was wrong. They kept up the firing from the boats on the fort until about 9 o'clock p.m., with but an occasional return shot. When the firing ceased and we stretched ourselves on the ground for a night's sleep if possible. I believe we have not lost a single man from the brigade this afternoon. Sunday, January 11th. We were up this morning at daybreak, having passed a very uncomfortable night on account of the cold. About 8 o'clock we got underway and moved around to our position on the left of the line, where we lay on our faces waiting for something to be done. An occasional shell passing over our heads. We did not have to wait long for something to be done, for as soon as the 19th Ohio Battery, that was right in front of our company and Company F, opened on the rebel works. The shell and canister came among us, and the boys begun to hug the ground pretty close. But notwithstanding, a bursting shell would occasionally play hob with some poor fellow, and it is a wonder to me that Company D, C, and F were not cut all to pieces. Sergeant Bartlett of our company got struck in the face early in the action with a piece of shell that disabled him for the rest of the day. One man in Company F was instantly killed, and a sergeant in the same company so badly wounded that he has since died. How many more were killed while we lay here I could not tell. About 2 o'clock, the rebel batteries were partially silenced, and we were ordered to our feet and to the front to charge the works. We passed around to the left of the battery and then across an open field right in the front of the rebel fort, under a murderous fire of musketry and canister, until we came within about 75 yards of the breastworks, where we lay down on our faces and began to load and fire as fast as we could. The gunboats in the meantime giving them Hail Columbia in the shape of solid shot and shell that tore things terribly every time they went into the works. In fact, they soon dismounted every rebel gun. While we lay here on the ground, we suffered worse than we did at any other place. 4 of our boys in Company D were wounded with musket shot. About half after 4 o'clock, the Rebs stuck up a white rag, and then ensued a scene of wild excitement and uncontrolled joy that baffles description. The boys rushed over the works, yelling and screaming, and laughed and shook hands with friend and foe, officers and privates indiscriminately, until the setting sun began to warn them that there was a vast amount of duty to be yet performed. Order once more restored, we began to look around to see what were the result of our labors. In the fort proper there had been 9 guns, 3 siege guns, and 6 rifled Parrots that were all entirely broken up, or so badly disabled that they will be totally unfit for service. To the west of the fort, extending from 3/4 to a mile, is a line of breastworks that were manned with batteries at suitable distances. The whole length, but they, like the rest, were in a terrible condition. The result of this day's labor is about 5,000 prisoners, principally Texans, 2 brigades, and Arkansas troops with their arms and accoutrements, which are principally of U.S. and English manufacture. We also captured the rebel major, General Churchill. After leaving the fort, we, the 96th, marched down about 300 or 400 yards into the battlefield and stacked our arms. And after looking among the dead to recognize those of the dead that belonged to our numbers, and then lay down on the ground for the night. Monday, January 12th. Last night I rested pretty comfortably, notwithstanding we were surrounded with the dead. This morning I took a stroll once more over the full length of the battlefield, and the sights that I there witnessed, I pray God I may never be under the necessity of seeing again. But I viewed it with much less disgust than I expected I ever could. But there is no use in attempting a description. I cannot do it. The greater part of today has been taken up by the other companies in burying their dead, and a melancholy task it is, but there is good coffins furnished for all the dead of the 96th. As our company have no dead, we have been enjoying ourselves as best we could, although we feel very sore and tired. Henry Sowers of Company E died on the boat last night of fever, and was buried with the rest of the boys today. The loss of our regiment in this engagement was Company A 3 killed and 2 wounded, B none, C 2 killed and 1 wounded, D 6 wounded, E 1 killed, 2 wounded, F 3 killed, 7 wounded. This company suffered worst of any. G 3 wounded, H 1 killed, 3 wounded, I none. Those wounded in Company D are Sergeant F. F. Bartlett, in the face with a shell. G. Brown, flesh wound in the thigh, musket shot but severe. Nathan Clark, musket shot in the kneecap, will disable the limb. James Marvis in the back with a musket shot, dangerous. And Corporal Irvin in the face with a shell, but slightly. The one killed in Company E was Matthew Burt of Marion County. He was shot through the temples by a musket shot. One I forgot in Company D, Daniel May, his arm broke by a musket shot, will be disabled, but not lose the arm. Scribner of Company E had an arm amputated. The other Company E man was one Kibler, in the temple, but not dangerous. January 13th. We still remain on the battlefield, but are expecting to be moved onto the boat every hour. We got a mail today, and it cheers the boys considerably. I wrote an answer to Anna's letter and put in some mementos of the fight, a piece of the garrison flag, and also a piece of another Secesh rag that they had floating over the Reb works. I run around some today and took another look at the battlefield. The rebel dead still remain unburied, but the prisoners were sent off today. Some of the boys recognize old friends and schoolmates among them, and it is said that some of our soldiers even found brothers among them, but they cannot understand things as we do, and it appears useless to talk to them. I also went to the boat today and was surprised to find that so large a number had failed to come out, for out of the company numbering 70 or 75, we had but 32 men on the battlefield, but one commissioned officer, Whaleman. January 14th. This morning it commenced raining hard about 5 o'clock, and rained furiously nearly all the forenoon. We poor soldiers just had to stand up and take it whether we liked it or not. In fact, we are completely saturated, and our arms are in like condition. The water stands in the furrows in the field 3 or 4 inches deep where we lay last night. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon they moved us onto the Hiawatha, which boat we had to unload onto the Louisiana, where we afterwards went ourselves. Here we lay until night again. It has stopped raining, but has turned bitter cold, and with our wet clothes it is almost unendurable. The only fire we have access to is in the front part of the cabin, and that is so crowded that it is almost impossible to get near it. Such hardships will surely kill us all off sooner or later. January 15th. Last night our rain turned to snow, and this morning the cold is only the more intense. How we will stand it, I can't tell, but there is but one alternative. Stand it we must. Our quarters are almost out in the snow, and our outside clothing is frozen stiff. We got started down the river a piece today, but not far. January 16th. Last night was about like the night before, only not quite so much snow, but more wind. We left this morning for the mouth of the White River, and run steadily until about 4 o'clock, when we put out into the old Mississippi, and tied up opposite the mouth of the White River. There is a lot of gunboats laying here, but what has become of the rest of the fleet I cannot tell, nor can I imagine what is to be the future movements of the Army. This evening 5 companies of our regiment were ordered out for picket duty, and out of the 5 companies there was but 60 new reported able for duty. One of our boys died today, D. Ferguson. January 17th. Today we run down to Napoleon at the mouth of the Arkansas, where we found our fleet awaiting us and future movements. Here we put in and tied up with the rest of the boats. How long we will remain here I can't tell. January 18th. Still at Napoleon and no prospect of a move today. Some of the boys of the upper end of the fleet have set the town on fire. This is the most important place between Memphis and Vicksburg, except Helena, and what the idea of burning it is I can't tell. There is a U.S. Marine hospital here built just before the war broke out. I expect the Secesh will burn the hospital building in retaliation. January 19th. This morning we are steamed up and off for Milliken's Bend, where it is said we are to go into camp until Grant's army is moved up to our assistance, and that will have to be done with some of the same transports that we are now using. We landed at a plantation this evening, and the boys are doing a pretty extensive business in the way of impressing livestock and vegetables such as chickens, peafowls, guinea fowls, calves, hogs, turnips, onions, sweet potatoes, and almost everything else they can lay hands. This was a fine place for those who felt disposed to go into that kind of business. I've been pretty sick today and this evening. January 20th. Today kept our course steadily down the river. Nothing of importance taking place on the run. It is now generally believed that Banks has Fort Hudson. January 21st. Today we made another run toward Milliken's Bend, where we arrived late in the afternoon and found the balance of the fleet. We put into shore but did not stay long until we put off down the river again, and did not stop until we reached the mouth of the Yazoo River, which is within about a half mile of Vicksburg. The Mississippi is up high to what it was when we were down here a few days ago. The health of the regiment is still very bad. Some are dying on the boat every day. It is terrible to contemplate, but we can't get out of it now till we get up the river again. January 22nd. Today our boat has been fussing around nearly all day trying to get a chance to land among the boats of our brigade, but it seemed as if they were all in some place around which all the adjoining bank was engaged. So it was nearly night before they finally succeeded in making a pretty good point. Now, whether we are going to land our things and go into camp or not is the question that perplexes the boys more than anything else. They think if they can only get on shore for a few days and get the filth rubbed from their persons, that disease will also disappear, and I believe it. January 23rd. This morning I was up bright and early and out on the bank, and almost the first thing I heard was that Samuel Tripany of Company E had died during the night. I had not even known he was seriously sick, yet he had taken sick and died within a few yards of our quarters. Many more are going the same way every day. It has been somewhat rainy and unpleasant today. This afternoon we were ordered off the boat to go into camp, but after staying on the bank till dark, we returned to the boat to remain until morning. January 24th. This morning we once more prepared to move to camp, but had to sit around on the bank again till noon before getting started. And then we were told that it was but a mile to camp. But when we came to tramp it over, through the mud and plowed ground, we found it nearer than one. And then such a camping grounds in what had once been cultivated as a cornfield, but now overgrown with cuckleberry, so thick that a cat could scarcely find her way through them. And the ground close to the river here, we are about 200 or 300 yards from it, is very flat and almost entirely sand. In every few feet there are holes from 6 inches to 3 feet in diameter, running straight down into the ground, sometimes for but a foot or so. And then again they appear to be bottomless. Since such is our camp for the present, we can see Vicksburg from our camp. It appears like a very nice little place. Captain Dwyer left us for home just before we left the boat. Whether he will ever come back to the company or not, I can't tell. So Lieutenant Williams is now our acting captain. January 25th. Sunday once more comes on us, and if it was not for my journal, I don't know how we would tell when the end of the week came around. The boys are all laying around kinder loose, as if they did not care whether, quote, school kept or not. But the whole regiment is about played out. Some of the boys are so sick this morning that they can't get out of the tents. What the object of putting such men into this field is, I cannot understand, unless it is to kill them off as fast as possible. W.J. Davis went to Memphis with the sick, so I have been informed. He is just as able for duty as many that remain, but, quote, kissing goes by favors in the army more certainly than anywhere else. If I only had the brass that some men have, I suppose I could get home sometime too. It has been nice and warm all day today, and the boys, like mud turtles, have been enjoying it, and the officers, quote, let 'em. January 26th. This morning, things look gloomy about camp, and the boys generally feel discouraged. About 10 o'clock, our company was ordered to report for picket duty immediately, and they would not even let us have time to eat our dinner that was already prepared for us. We found the picket station about 1.5 miles from the camp on the line of the railroad running from here to some point in the interior, the capital, I believe. The track is piled full of fence rails and rubbish, which is calculated to be used in case of necessity, as a breastwork, and a very good one it will make if the boys don't burn it all up to keep themselves warm and dry. There is about 4 companies detailed from each regiment to do duty here, and they are placed so close that they would form a line of 2 ranks all the way behind the breastworks. We also have an outpost picket post, and they are within whispering distance of each other. January 27th. Last night it rained and blowed all night, and the only alternative left for we that were on picket duty was to draw our overcoats around ourselves and take it. On the reserve we built a rousing fire and gathered around it as close as we dare, and in that way kept in an endurable condition. But how the poor fellows on the advance station managed to get through the night without freezing is a mystery to me. My prayer is, God save one from such service in the future. We thought we had seen some hard times in Kentucky, but the Kentucky service was play in comparison to this. About 12 o'clock we were relieved and once more turned our steps toward camp. A weary, muddy march, but we were all glad to get through with. The river is still slowly rising, and if it continues, we soon shall hear that the canal is open and Vicksburg back in the country and harmless. January 28th. Today everything still appears to be quiet about Vicksburg. The canal was opened, and the water started through the canal. It is said that it runs with considerable rapidity, but the channel is too narrow yet to admit of boats passing through. But it will be large enough before many days, for the river still is rising, and continues to rise. We were ordered to report for picket duty today, but the order was countermanded again before we got started, and the boys were not sorry about it. Camp guard is also just about played out in our regiment. It is no longer effective, for the boys think it is a useless institution, at any rate, and run in and out at pleasure. January 29th. This morning the company are ordered to report for picket again, and it is with feelings of considerable reluctance that I can consent in my own mind that I am able to perform duty, but the company is so small that I suppose I must go. We arrived at the picket station about 11 o'clock a.m., and I with 4 privates took charge of the 2 outposts, and remained there until evening when the relief came out, and then, as we had picketed the outposts all day, we gave them the privilege of trying it on for the night while we went into the reserve and tried to get a little sleep. January 30th. Last night was a miserable night for me. I could not sleep, and what was the reason I cannot tell. If I could only get my rest regularly as we used to, I believe it would all come right again in course of time. At about 9 o'clock today, we once more struck for camp, where we arrived about noon. After arriving in camp, we found things moving on after the old style, with the exception that the company had drawn some fresh beef and were preparing to have a grand feast. January 31st. Last night at about 9 o'clock, our company were ordered to report to the boat Tigress with 1 day's rations in our haversacks, but for my part I did not go, and afterwards was very glad that I did refuse, for about 11 o'clock the boys all returned, saying that they would not receive them with less than 2 days' rations in their haversacks, and they were ordered to report today at 10 o'clock with that much provisions in their haversacks. Accordingly, the hour of 10 today finds us on board, not the boat Tigris, but the Munchaha, making our way up the river. Sometime about noon we landed about perhaps 30 or 40 miles up the river and threw out 2 companies for picket duty, and a couple more for fatigue, for we now begin to find that our business is to take in word. Our company and the other companies, of which there is 5 or 6, are left at the boats as a reserve in case of need. The companies on this boat are 2 from the 96th, 2 from the 131st Illinois, 2 from the 42nd Ohio, 2 from the 19th Kentucky, and some that went on picket I did not learn where from. I don't believe there is a company on the boat that can muster 25 men. This evening it began to rain a little, and we all put on board the boat for shelter. February 1st. Last night, after laying down as usual and getting into a comfortable sleep, we were all roused by the cry of fire, and such a scene of confusion I hardly ever witnessed. Some said our pickets were driven in, while others declared the boat was on fire, and others again were constantly calling on the boys to not become excited, for we could get out of the way anyhow, and after all had cleared the boat, I walked forward and found that the fire was but a little mite in one of the wood piles, which the boatmen had already nearly extinguished. So I went back to my nest, feeling none the better for my disturbance. This morning it looks cloudy and threatens rain. Nevertheless, Company C are ordered off to load wood, while Company D remains in the dry on the boat. I'd almost forgotten this was Sunday, and today was the day I intended to have written again to Anna, but now it is impossible. Immediately after dinner, Company D was ordered to go and help load wood, but the rain has now ceased, and the sun is pleasantly shining. Nothing of importance occurred this afternoon, except our rations ran out, and the boys declare that they will not work if they can't eat. What will be done tomorrow, time will tell. We will go home in all probability, or rather back to camp. February 2nd. This morning we were all ordered on board the Tecumseh to go back to camp while another set of boys who have rations come on this boat and finish loading her. We got on board the Tecumseh about 9 o'clock, and about 10 o'clock started once more for the camp in front of Vicksburg. We got to the landing within 3 miles of camp about half past 11 o'clock, and by half past 1 or 2 o'clock we arrived at the old stamping ground, well tired out and weary of fatigue duty. But the boys in camp had plenty of rations cooked, such as they were, so they soon forgot their troubles and all passed off right for the balance of the day. February 3rd. Today nothing has happened of importance. The boys have been trying to get a little rest. We have been so constantly on duty of late that we hardly get time to wash our clothes, and in fact don't get time to more than half do it. Today we got some new clothing. I drew a blanket in place of one lost on the battlefield at Arkansas Post and some socks. So much for this day. February 4th. Today has been a nasty, disagreeable, rainy day. The boys have lain in their tents all day, for it is impossible to get around if they should go out. Towards night it began to hail a little, and it now gives promise of a very disagreeable night. But in our tent the boys have got an old pan and put some fire in it, over which they have heated some cold coffee and toasted some crackers, and managed to get a soldier's supper of the most approved style. But so it goes. We consider ourselves lucky that we are not on fatigue or picket duty, as some poor fellows are. I wrote to Anna today again, but I can't imagine why I don't get any letters from home. It is getting to be a terrible suspense to have to wait so long a time. It is now nearly a month since I have had a scratch of a pen from Ohio or any other place. February 5th. Today I received 2 letters, one from Anna and one from Maria. The latter came bordered with a black stripe, and whether to open it or not I hardly know. But after opening it and perusing the contents, I found that it contained the mournful intelligence of Grandfather Zuck's death, and also of the death of little Perry Bowen, my sister Priscilla's youngest child. And no one knows how heavy falls the news of the death of friends at home upon the ears and heart of the soldier, who is thousands of miles from home, and don't know but perhaps the next intelligence he receives from home may be of the sickness of his own family or children. God grant to continue to vouchsafe to my wife and child, Nettie, the protection and health he has thus far so mercifully extended to them. Things in camp are moving off the same as usual, and now it begins to assume the appearance of, quote, olden times. Mud. February 6th. This has been a fine day, and camp life is still beginning to be more endurable. Last night I was offered the chance to go into a pioneer corps that is being raised in this Army Corps, the 13th. But after receiving such distressing news from home, I did not feel much in the humor for making a hasty decision in the matter, and having but a few minutes to decide in, the chance was allowed to slip. February 7th. Today nothing of importance has taken place to disturb the equanimity of our present course of camp life. February 8th. This morning we were once more ordered to be ready at 9 o'clock to go on picket, and of course that hour has found us on the road to the station. We found after arriving at our post that the 5 companies detailed from our regiment would have to picket a line of about 3 miles, and the companies numbering about 15 men to the company makes pretty heavy picketing. But I guess it is not considered so dangerous here as it was at first, hence the decrease in strength of the detail. February 9th. Just 6 months ago this morning, I enlisted to become a soldier in Uncle Sam's army, and what sad changes have taken place since then. Our company that 2 weeks from that time numbered 96 men in Camp Delaware, well and hearty, can now with difficulty raise 12 and 15 men for duty, and of the 3 commissioned officers that then seemed able for any service, only one remains fit for duty, Williams. One resigned and gone home, Dwyer, and the third is reduced to almost a skeleton, and is entirely unfit for duty. The other companies in the regiment have fared about the same. This forenoon at about 10 o'clock, we were relieved from picket and returned while the balance of the day was spent resting our tired limbs. Today our company once more resumes her old plan of dividing into messes, and I think it will prove much better. The only difference is there is only 3 messes instead of 4, and they are much smaller. February 10th. Today has been a beautiful day. The sun has shone as warm as on a northern summer's day. But still we are encamped in one of these pestilential swamps, and a kind of stupor has crept over the members of the regiment, so that they move only when they can't help themselves, for to supply the wants of nature. But I do not anticipate that we will remain just here in this position, for things about here pertaining to the siege of Vicksburg seem to be now about reaching their culminating point. At least that is my humble opinion from what I can learn. I forgot to say in my journal of the 7th that Milton Ashbaugh of the 30th OBI gave me a call, and a welcome visitor it is. Always a relief to meet an Ohio soldier from any other regiment. They have until recently been in the Western Virginia service. Today another member of Company D was laid beneath, quote, the clods of the valley. His name was Thomas Maiden, and was from Gilead. This makes the 6th one that has died in this company of disease since we left Memphis. But such is the common lot, and this sad experience only teaches how necessary it is that we should all be prepared for that solemn change that will sooner or later overtake us all. February 11th. Just 1 month ago today was a day upon which took place one of the leading events in my history thus far, the Battle of Arkansas Post of Fort Hindruan, and I fear that the experience of that day has not impressed me with as deep a feeling of gratitude and reverence as it should have done, for a kind and merciful God who so signally and mercifully shielded me from harm, and has ever since upheld and protected me. O God, may each recurring month and day and hour make me sensible of my dependence on Thee, the giver of all good and perfect gifts. Nothing worthy of note has broken the monotony of our camp life today. February 12th. Today, as usual of late, has passed with but little occurring of interest to the soldier. Last night, or rather this morning, we had another heavy, dashing rain, the only beauty of which was it did not last long, but still it gave the sandy earth a thorough soaking, at the same time giving the soldiers a chance to try once more what virtue there is in government leather. February 13th. This morning I am detailed for guard duty, and Colonel Vance is getting very strict in regard to our camp guards, for they have almost disregarded the thing altogether of late. And now to make it effectual, the colonel threatens to punish severely anyone not found discharging his duty as becomes a guard. The weather has been fine today, and the boys are busy fixing the tents inside and out, so that if it should rain soon again, we need not be right down in the mud. February 14th. Last night we had another heavy rainstorm, but it was not of any length for this country, lasting but an hour or two, and then a little at intervals until morning. One of our gunboats took advantage of the darkening of the night and slowly drifted downstream past the rebel batteries before they discovered her, and then she was pretty well out of harm's way. Notwithstanding, a pretty heavy cannonade was kept up for some time on the boat, while she replied by throwing an occasional broadside into the city. This morning, General Burbridge's brigade are ordered to hold themselves in readiness to move by 7 o'clock with 7-day rations. About 9 o'clock, we were underway to the river where we embarked our regiment, going on board the Ohio Belle, after which we all put up the river for some purpose we know not. Yet what is said is that we are going to Cypress Bend, a distance of about 160 miles, where it is said there is a rebel battery that is troublesome to the navigation of the Mississippi for government transports. February 15th. Today we have made a pretty steady run of it all day, passing on our way, and on the Mississippi side, the point known as Providence, in the rear of which is Providence Lake. Here government has quite a large force encamped doing something, and for the life of me I can't exactly understand what. This place is about 60 miles from Vicksburg and contains 3 or 4 churches. Nothing more of importance today. February 16th. This morning the boats took an early start and made the point of our destination about 8 o'clock in the morning, where we found a gunboat stationed. We were speedily disembarked and formed in line ready to go in pursuit of the Rebs, who it was said had made tracks for a point about 7 miles back from the river when they learned of our approach. After starting, it began to rain a little, and it was not long until the roads, which are here composed of sand and a composition of some kind of black material, more resembling tar than anything else, began to assume the slippery state, and now commenced the hardest march that we have ever made yet, for it was not long until it became almost an utter impossibility to keep on our feet in the road, and when we did it was only by stepping in the holes made in the mud by the constant stepping of feet in one place, and they were fast filling up with water. And to leave the road we could not better ourselves, for it was but a continued young canebrake, the new growth being about a foot or 18 inches high, and growing in a swamp when the water was from 3 inches to any required depth. Now to drag ourselves through this kind of a country with our load, knapsacks and such, seemed like an impossibility, but most of us did manage to do it, arriving at the point of our destination about 5 o'clock p.m., where we were soon comfortably quartered, feasting on the fat of the land, hog, chicken, and molasses, of which there was plenty. But the great drawback was there was no enemy, but there had been one there 1 or 2 weeks before. So our jaunt through the mud proved a wild goose chase after all. The nest was warm, but the bird had flown, and the boys were not very sorry about their muddy tramp through the rain and mud. We had a free license here to take just what we wanted to eat or lie where we wanted, and splendid quarters to stay in. February 17th. This morning we were up early, and after partaking of a sumptuous breakfast, prepared as a soldier only knows how to prepare it, we once more formed in the mud and started back in the direction of the boats. The experience of the day was almost the same as yesterday, with the exception that there was but little or no rain. But nevertheless, the mud, of course, had not become the less deep. Neither had it gotten any the less sticky. But if anything, was a deal of a sight worse than yesterday. After marching about 1.5 miles, we came to a halt at a good-sized bridge where a sudden firing was opened in the front, and it was some time before we could understand exactly what it meant, most of us supposing at the time that our front was attacked by the Rebs. But it proved to be only the picket discharging their loaded pieces to preserve the order during the rain. It was not long, however, before we were once more on the move, or rather slip, for it was about as much slip as anything else. Sometimes the boys would leave full mark in Mississippi mud, and in not a very poetical way at that, but we managed to get back to the river anyhow, and here found a lot of our boys under arrest for the avowed crime of being sick and falling back. They had been shelled in by the gunboats yesterday, and this evening the same game is being played over with the poor fellows who are so unlucky as not to have kept up with their regiments. It is hard to tell where this thing will end. February 18th. Today we have done nothing of importance, and it appears that the calculation is that we are to enjoy 1 day's rest after 2 such hard days' work. The weather has moderated somewhat and gives promise of a good day, or so ahead at least in this disagreeable country. February 19th. Last night sometime we run up the river quite a distance, and are this morning landed on the Arkansas side. The day is fine, and the land on this side looks higher than on the Mississippi side. About 12 o'clock the brigade were ordered off the boats with 1 day's rations in haversacks to go in pursuit of a rebel battery, and some cavalry that are regular cavalry, in company with a lot the infantry that had been mounted on mules for the purpose had discovered, some distance back from the river. About 2 o'clock we got started, and were soon in full pursuit of the Rebs, who, true to their nature, were in full retreat. We chased them about 8 or 9 miles, and about 5 p.m. came to a bay where they had abandoned one of their cannon. Here we halted for the night, after shelling the woods ahead, and companies D and C of the 96th went on picket for the night. February 20th. Again we are on our way to the boats, having started about 9 o'clock. But about 10 o'clock we had to countermarch about 1 mile, the cavalry having seen some rebel cavalry hovering in our rear. We halted this time until 2 in the afternoon without seeing anything, and then again started for the boats, where we arrived about sundown. The result of this trip was 1 or 2 cavalry horses killed on our side, and 1 rebel killed and 3 or 4 prisoners. The roads were fine, and the country looks better for farming purposes than on the opposite side of the Mississippi. Some fruit trees, such as peach, are in bloom here at this time. Lots of strange birds, to me, are here to be seen in the woods, especially the parakeet, which appears to be a native. February 21st. Last night, after lying down to rest our weary limbs, the order came for us to get up and cook 2 days' rations and be ready for a march by 4 o'clock in the morning. And how we are to do it, I can't for the life of me tell, for there is but 1 day's rations on the boat, for this is the 7th day out on the trip. But time and circumstances solved what we could not, as a heavy dashing rain has prevented any move from the boats at the appointed hour. But what we are to do for rations, I can't conceive. February 22. Sunday comes in again, but for us it makes no difference what the good book says about keeping it holy, for the order of the night before last was repeated last night. But daylight caught us long before we got ready to move, for the gunboat that accompanies the expeditions got stuck on a bar and had to be pulled off before we dared to move. So ended this day's march. After getting the gunboat loosed, we run down the river a mile or 2, and then took on all the wood the boats could conveniently stow away, and then turned toward camp with the avowed intention of making the trip as short a little foraging and other stoppages would permit. February 23rd. This morning we were aroused at 4 o'clock by the cry, quote, "Get ready to march with 2 days' rations in haversacks by 6 o'clock." And upon getting up, we found that we were landed again at Cypress Bend, our first landing place, and that our rations were to consist of much, for this was the only mode of preparation we could conceive of for the small pittance of cornmeal that was issued to us. Well, mush it was, and about 9 o'clock we were on the move nearly in the same direction we had taken on our first incursion. We had not proceeded over 4 miles when our advance guard came upon a small detachment of rebel cavalry, to whom they gave chase, but we soon found that the roads were so bad and the bridges were destroyed to such an extent that it was going to be slow work with the infantry and artillery, and it was not long until we came to a full stop in front of a stream that seemed almost impassable, the water being up to the waists of those who attempted to cross. Here we had to halt about 2 hours, which time the Rebs made good use of in making the fast time from our advancing force of about 500 cavalry. To be continued. Now we have a comment here on this passage from the diary. First is from John Ray, my father. Quote, "ZFM C9 was the most gripping one yet. I did not know that our Civil War ancestor had actually seen battlefield action. The horrors of actual war and actual killing were so odious to him that he could not bring himself to write down a narrative description. It is very hard to imagine how he and the other soldiers who did not die from the war survived the elements. I had always understood that he was a surveyor for General Grant, and I very much enjoyed the preliminaries which I believe are leading to that. John S. Ray, Cleveland, Ohio." And the next comment is from Dale and Lenore Hughes. Lenore is the granddaughter of Tom Zuck. "The last piece on Grandfather Zuck's diary was a masterpiece in helping us understand the dreadful price all our boys paid that the rest of us could enjoy freedom. May we all keep this sort of understanding of what has gone before at our fingertips to help us know how lucky we are. Dale and Lenore Hughes, Marion, Ohio." And finally, there's a comment from my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, Gus Smallshaw, quote, "I enjoyed your great-grandfather's journal while in Uncle Sam's army. A few days ago I read the last installment of Grandpa Zook's journal, and if you have any more of his writings, send them." So that concludes our today's talk on Tom Zook's Civil War Diary. Good luck to you in your efforts, if you're making them, to find and preserve old letters and diaries and interview elderly family relatives and type them up and perhaps make YouTube videos also. Anyway, I really thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you, take care, and I'll see you next time.